Welcome back to another custom-tailored deep dive. This one is designed specifically for you. We know you're always looking to cut through the noise and get straight to the core of a really compelling narrative. And today, we have an incredibly dense, highly textured piece of source material to unpack.
Yeah, we really do. It's a massive story. We're looking at excerpts from a gripping thriller novel called The Mozart Conspiracy by Scott Mariani.
Right. And our mission today is to completely dissect this high-stakes narrative. We're going to be weaving together brutal modern-day assassinations, a haunted ex-SAS operative seeking some kind of violent redemption, and a centuries-old musical mystery that seems to be, pulling all the strings from the grave.
It's a lot to cover. We are going to analyze the tactical, the psychological, and the historical elements that are hidden within this text.
But before we get to the modern-day gunfights and the clandestine operations, we have to start with the historical hook that frames this entire story. The author uses an epigraph to open the text, and it's a chilling quote directly from Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart.
Right, from 1791.
Exactly. It reads, quote, "I know I must die. Someone has given me aqua tofana and has calculated the precise time of my death for which they have ordered a requiem. It is for myself that I am writing this."
It's a phenomenal way to set the stage for the reader. And for you listening right now, when we look at that historical claim, we are looking at something that fundamentally alters how we perceive the entire narrative.
I mean, Mozart himself is explicitly stating he was poisoned.
Yes, specifically with aqua tofana.
Yeah.
Now, to truly appreciate the weight of that, we have to understand what aqua tofana actually was. This wasn't just a generic poison. It was a highly lethal, entirely untraceable concoction that became infamous in 17th century Italy.
It was allegedly created by a woman named Giulia Tofana, right?
Exactly. And it was primarily composed of arsenic, lead, and belladonna.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the history of this specific poison is wild. From what I understand, Giulia Tofana wasn't just, mixing this up in a dark alley. She was basically running an underground apothecary for women who were trapped in abusive marriages.
Yeah, they had no legal way out of those situations back then.
Right, so she provided this poison, disguised as a cosmetic product or a religious healing oil. I think it was often called the manna of St. Nicholas.
Precisely. And the genius, if you can call it that, of aqua tofana was its subtlety. It was colorless, odorless, and tasteless.
Which is terrifying.
Truly. But more importantly, it didn't kill the victim immediately. It was administered in drops over days or weeks. The first dose would make the victim feel slightly weak, mimicking the onset of a common cold.
So nobody suspects a thing.
Right. The second dose would cause symptoms akin to a severe stomach bug or the flu. By the third or fourth dose, the victim would pass away. Because it perfectly mimicked the natural progression of illness, doctors of the era simply recorded the death as a natural passing.
Because they already had limited diagnostic tools anyway.
Exactly. There was absolutely no suspicion of foul play.
So when Mozart, sitting in Vienna decades later, specifically names aqua tofana, he isn't just saying, hey, I've been poisoned.
No, he's saying something much more specific.
He is saying, I have been marked for death by a method specifically designed to be invisible, by people who have calculated a slow, untraceable demise.
It immediately casts this long, dark shadow over all the modern-day events that follow in the chapters we are analyzing. It establishes a pervasive theme of hidden agendas.
It really does. It tells us that we are entering a world of calculated death.
And the idea that someone could engineer a legendary composer's demise and leave no trace echoes perfectly throughout the modern conspiracy we're about to explore. As you listen to the modern timeline today, you are primed to view every accident or coincidence through the lens of a perfectly executed invisible murder.
And the text wastes absolutely no time throwing us into that exact kind of orchestrated nightmare. The first major event of the story opens in Austria on January 9th.
We are introduced to a man named Oliver Llewellyn.
Right. We learn he's the brother of a famous opera star and a former soldier. And the scene is just terrifying. He is breathless with shock, stumbling away from a bare stone wall and some kind of strange, vaulted room.
He has just witnessed a horrific, unspecified murder.
The text doesn't explicitly tell us what they did to the man in that room, only that it was more horrible than anything Oliver could have imagined. And crucially, he recorded the entire act on his Sony Ericsson phone.
He has the absolute, undeniable digital evidence of this atrocity in his pocket.
And this is where we have to look at the psychology of the environment. The contrast in this opening sequence is what makes it so incredibly effective from a storytelling perspective.
Oh, absolutely. You have this visceral, unspeakable violence that Oliver has just recorded, and then he runs up a flight of stone steps, crosses a bridgeway, and suddenly he is back in the main part of the house.
And the environment completely shifts.
It does. It's a scene of opulent classical architecture. There are glittering chandeliers. Waiters are circling with silver trays laden with champagne flutes. There is a string quartet in the ballroom playing a Strauss waltz.
It's a cover-up hiding in plain sight.
Mm.
It's the ultimate cognitive dissonance for Oliver, isn't it?
Completely. He's standing there with the digital equivalent of a smoking gun in his pocket, a video of a brutal execution, and everyone around him is sipping bubbly and discussing the arts.
The surreal juxtaposition of a brutal execution taking place just a few corridors away from high society sipping champagne to a waltz is deeply unsettling.
It perfectly mirrors the overarching theme we discussed with Mozart. Terrible truths hidden beneath elegant classical facades. The perpetrators of this violence aren't street thugs. They inhabit the upper echelons of society.
They are comfortable operating right underneath the glittering chandeliers.
It really is surreal. And Oliver, who is wearing a tuxedo, has to blend right back into this high society crowd. He walks down a sweeping double staircase, desperately trying to conceal his panic.
His heart rate must be through the roof.
He snatches a glass of champagne just to steady his nerves, to look like everyone else. He looks across the room and sees a gleaming Bechstein grand piano.
Now, this is a great detail in the text. He had just been playing a Debussy recital on that very piano minutes before.
It anchors how quickly his reality has fractured.
Suddenly, an elderly gentleman with wire-framed glasses, referred to as Herr Meyer, taps him on the shoulder and congratulates him on the recital in German.
You can imagine the spike of adrenaline Oliver experiences at that tap on the shoulder. He is in full fight-or-flight mode.
Absolutely. Oliver is forced to feign illness just to escape the conversation. He literally stammers out the word crank, meaning sick, and flees through the crowd, bumping into a woman in a sequin gown.
He knows the security guards with radios are already coming down the stairs, pointing at him.
He knows that if they catch him, if they find that Sony Ericsson phone in his pocket with the video file, he is a dead man.
This is where the tactical reality of his situation sets in. He makes it to the main doorway, and the sensory details the text provides are striking.
The cold, crisp air, his breath billowing, the clammy sweat on his forehead.
We get a flash of lightning illuminating the 18th century facade of the mansion, highlighting his escape vehicle.
A classic racing green MG Midget, parked conspicuously between a glistening Bentley and a Lamborghini.
That detail alone tells you a lot about Oliver. He's a bit of an eccentric, a classic car enthusiast, entirely out of place among the ultra-wealthy, modern supercar attendees.
And a rear-wheel drive, lightweight, classic British sports car is probably the absolute worst vehicle you could choose for a high-speed getaway on Austrian ice in January.
It is a mechanical nightmare for those conditions.
Yep.
An MG Midget has very little weight over the rear drive wheels, meaning traction on ice is going to be virtually non-existent.
But he has no choice. He jumps in, ignores the security guard yelling halt, and spins the tires on the icy cobbles.
He speeds up the driveway towards the main wrought iron gates, which are gliding shut.
And instead of stopping, he just aims the little MG at the gap and rams the gates.
The front wings buckle, but he punches through, and then begins this frantic, icy car chase.
A pursuit car is right on his tail, dazzling him with its headlights in the rear-view mirror as snow-laden conifers flash by. Oliver hits a patch of sheet ice, goes into a skid, grapples with the wheel, and just barely regains control.
But his pursuers aren't so lucky. They hit the glassy surface in his wake, lose their grip entirely, and spin completely out of control into the trees.
He survives the immediate physical chase, but the psychological tension doesn't drop for a single second.
No, it doesn't. 20 minutes later, he is back at his guest house. He parks the dented MG out of sight. A massive storm is rolling in, turning the snow to torrential rain.
And here's where we see his priority, which is fascinating from a modern perspective. It's not calling the police, it's not calling his sister, it's preserving the data.
Which is a very specific choice.
Wait, hold on. Why wouldn't he call the police? He has video evidence of a murder. Isn't that the first instinct?
Normally, yes. But remember the environment he just fled. The murder took place in a mansion filled with ultra-wealthy, highly connected individuals.
The security guards were part of it.
Exactly. If you are an ex-soldier, your situational awareness tells you that local law enforcement might already be compromised, or at the very least, vastly outgunned in terms of legal and political influence.
That makes total sense. He knows he has stumbled into something massive, a conspiracy that operates above standard jurisdiction.
He needs to get the evidence to someone outside that sphere of influence.
So he boots up his laptop, and the text emphasizes his agonizing wait for it to load. We've all been there, staring at a progress bar when we're in a rush. But for him, those seconds could mean life or death.
He goes to an email in his inbox with a very specific subject line, the Mozart letter.
It's from someone he calls the professor. He hits a reply and types an urgent, jittery message stating he must talk, he has discovered something, and explicitly uses the word danger.
And this detail is critical. He is creating a digital breadcrumb trail. He is linking the immediate danger he is in directly to this historical research, the Mozart letter.
But he doesn't just leave it at the email. He takes the phone, plugs it in with a USB cable, and downloads the video clip. He knows he can't be caught with it.
He tries to email the video to an unnamed woman, referred to in his internal monologue only as her, knowing she'll receive it wherever she is.
But right as he is typing, the storm takes out the power lines. The internet is dead. The phone line is dead. He is completely isolated in the dark, running purely on laptop battery power.
It's the ultimate isolation. He has the proof, but the digital bridge to the outside world has just been severed.
And I have to point out a moment of sheer frustration here. Oliver records a highly sensitive murder, transfers it to his laptop to burn a copy, but he leaves the original file on his phone when he eventually goes on the run.
Yeah, that's a tough one to read.
It seems like an incredibly amateur mistake for a former soldier, doesn't it? Why wouldn't you scrub the device you're carrying?
It does seem reckless in hindsight, absolutely. But if we analyze cognitive degradation under extreme stress, it paints a very realistic picture. The human brain, when flooded with cortisol and adrenaline during a fight-or-flight response, prioritizes gross motor functions and immediate survival over complex multi-step logical sequencing.
He is operating in the dark. His heart is pounding. He expects the door to be kicked in at any second.
His singular focus becomes hide the backup, and once that task is achieved, his brain immediately shifts to escape. The critical step of deleting the source file simply gets bypassed by a panicked nervous system.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. He's a trained soldier, but he's still human, and panic degrades training. And speaking of hiding the backup, this leads to one of the most brilliant physical details in the narrative.
Oliver has to improvise a physical hiding place for digital evidence, a practice basically known as steganography, hiding data in plain sight.
Precisely. In the dark, he burns the video onto a CD-ROM. Then, fumbling blindly, he finds a box set of Mozart's opera, The Magic Flute.
He was already planning to post this back to this unnamed woman.
He pulls out one of the actual music CDs, scribbles an urgent warning on the burned CD-ROM with a marker, slots it into the case, and covers it with a genuine Mozart disc before shutting the box.
Thematically, that is just brilliant by the author. He is taking undeniable digital evidence of a massive, deadly modern conspiracy and physically hiding it inside a piece of classical Mozart media.
The past and the present, the historical mystery and the modern murder, are literally layered on top of each other in that padded envelope.
It's a perfect encapsulation of the book's premise. And structurally, it transitions the narrative from a digital pursuit to a physical one.
He runs out into the sleet in his soaked tuxedo, shoves the package into a post box in the deserted streets, and thinks he just needs to pack and run. He believes he has bought himself a lifeline.
But it's too late. He is 50 yards from the guest house when powerful headlamps sweep over him. A Mercedes bears down on him.
He slips on the wet pavement, and 4 grim-faced men bundle him into the back seat. And the text notes that this entire ride is conducted in total silence.
Which is almost more terrifying than if they were threatening him.
If they're silent, they aren't trying to intimidate him into giving something up. They aren't negotiating. They already know exactly what they're going to do with him.
Exactly. It's the cold professionalism of the killers that is truly frightening here. They don't need to posture. They drive him to the edge of a frozen lake under pale moonlight.
They haul him out, slam him against the car, and expertly frisk him. And this is when they find the phone.
Oliver realizes, with absolute dread, that his cognitive lapse, forgetting to delete the original video clip from the device, has doomed him.
And then he gets a look at the man holding the pistol. A tall, heavily built man, sandy crew cut, with a distinctly twisted and mangled earlobe.
Oliver recognizes him. He says, "I've seen you before." But the killer just ignores the recognition and tells him to walk.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The method of execution. When you think of an assassination in a thriller, you think of a sniper, a car bomb, or a bullet to the back of the head.
Right, the standard tropes.
But the man with the mangled ear doesn't just shoot Oliver. He forces Oliver to walk out onto the solid ice of the lake.
Oliver's nerves are screaming. He's sweating in his soaking wet tuxedo in the freezing cold.
He gets 30 yards out and hears a gunshot. He flinches, waiting for the impact. But there's no pain.
He just feels the strike of the bullet resonate through the ice under his feet. He watches a blue fissure spread from a bullet hole in the ice with a ripping crackle.
It is a tactically brutal, incredibly calculated maneuver, and it speaks to the sophistication of this conspiracy.
The killers aren't aiming at Oliver. They're aiming at the environment beneath him. Another man hands the tall killer a stubby submachine gun. The killer grins, holds it at the hip, and unleashes a fully automatic blast directly at Oliver's feet.
Put yourself in Oliver's shoes for a second. You're standing on a frozen lake in the dead of winter, and a man is pouring automatic gunfire into the ground you are standing on. The sheer terror of that.
It is a horrific scenario. The ice churns into splinters under the barrage of 9mm rounds. A spider's web of cracks appears. The structural integrity of the surface groans and completely gives way.
The sheer physical shock of plunging into icy water drives the breath out of his lungs instantly.
It's an involuntary physiological response known as the mammalian diving reflex, which in freezing temperatures often causes victims to gasp and inhale water immediately.
He slips under the ice sheet into the blackness, and the calculation here is chilling. Because they shot the ice, and not him, there will be no bullet holes in his body.
When the local authorities eventually find him, what do they see?
They see exactly what they are supposed to see.
When a coroner examines the body, they will find water in the lungs, perhaps diatoms, microscopic algae, confirming he drowned in that specific lake.
They will find no ballistic evidence, no defensive wounds from a struggle.
Combined with the fact that he fled a party in a tuxedo, the lack of forensic evidence makes it incredibly easy for these highly organized conspirators to officially cover this up as a tragic, drunken accident.
The guest had too much champagne, went for an ill-advised walk on the ice, and fell through. Case closed.
As Oliver drowns, fighting the freezing water filling his lungs, trapped beneath a transparent ceiling of ice, he thinks he can hear the killers laughing.
It is a chillingly efficient, flawlessly engineered end. It is a devastating opening sequence. We go from a grand ballroom playing a Strauss waltz to a man drowning under a frozen lake in a matter of pages.
It sets the stakes incredibly high.
But the narrative doesn't let us dwell on the ice. It immediately shifts gears and continents. We move forward 11 months later, leaving the cold of Austria for the heat of southern Turkey.
And we are introduced to Benedict Hope, Ben Hope.
And his introduction is just as explosive as the killers on the lake, but in a completely different way.
We shift from an orchestrated execution to raw, kinetic rescue. We start with a quiet scene. Two men playing cards in a secluded house.
Suddenly, the roar of an engine shatters the silence. A rust-pitted Ford pickup truck physically crashes through the patio windows, exploding glass, timber, and brickwork directly into the kitchen.
It's basically a localized earthquake.
And stepping out of the dust and debris of that truck is our anti-hero, Ben Hope. He is dressed entirely in black. Combat jacket, ski mask, gloves.
And what I love about this is that he doesn't announce himself. There is no Mookie-style one-liner.
As the card players stumble backward in shock, Ben simply draws a silenced 9mm Browning and shoots them both twice in the chest. Rapid fire.
Then he walks over with complete detachment and puts a single bullet in each of their heads to ensure they are permanently down.
That lack of hesitation tells us everything about his background.
This isn't a chaotic brawl. It is a meticulously planned, dynamic entry, a core component of close quarters battle, or CQB.
We learn from his internal monologue that he's been observing this house for 3 days from the tree line.
He knew the guards' routine. He knew where they kept the keys to the pickup. He calculated exactly how to breach the structural integrity of the house to maximize shock and awe.
Effectively resetting his enemy's OD loop. Observe, orient, decide, act.
Before they could even orient to the fact that a truck was in their kitchen, he had acted. He neutralized the immediate threats with maximum speed and zero hesitation.
And we quickly learn why he is employing such extreme violence. He kicks down a flimsy wooden door to find a 13-year-old girl named Catherine Peterson curled up in a corner in absolute terror.
The text shows a brilliant shift in Ben's demeanor here. He takes off his ski mask, showing his face and thick blonde hair.
He knows a mask is terrifying to a victim. He speaks softly to her. He shows her a physical photograph of himself standing with her parents to instantly prove he's an authorized friend, not the local police or another buyer.
And Catherine, even in her profound state of shock, asks a crucial question. She looks at him and says, "What about Maria?"
This is the pivotal moment for understanding Ben's character, and it introduces a horrifying reality.
Catherine points him toward another captive, an 11 or 12-year-old girl named Maria. Ben finds her heavily doped, lying on a mattress in a squalid room.
But before he reaches her, he walks through a space filled with tripods, cheap blading equipment, and a television monitor playing a crudely shot video featuring one of the men he just killed and the young girl, Maria.
It's the absolute darkest underbelly of human trafficking.
And Ben's reaction isn't professional detachment. In a flash of pure, visceral rage, he kicks the TV set, imploding the screen in a shower of Starks.
To understand why this specific visual triggers such a massive internal reaction, we have to look at the psychological driver that the author provides in the text.
Yes, the text gives us a very heavy defining piece of backstory here.
Ben carries a lingering, heavily repressed trauma from a previous extraction job in Mexico City. He was hired to save a boy, just short of his 11th birthday. But despite his skills, he arrived too late.
The kidnappers had slaughtered the child before the ransom demand was even officially made.
Ben was the one who had to find the body, which had been stuffed into a barrel, missing his fingers and ears.
Ben reflects internally that sometimes the worst kind of kidnappers don't even do it for the money. They do it for the sheer cruelty of it.
That is a staggering level of moral injury for an operator to carry. He failed to save a child from a horrific fate, and that sheer, senseless violence haunts him.
It fuels this relentless, borderline obsessive persistence we see in Turkey. We learn he spent 2 entire months overturning every stone, tracking false leads, bribing informants, just to find this one house.
And that profound trauma dictates his actions in the climax of this chapter. Ben carries the heavily sedated Maria to his hidden Land Rover, gently putting his jacket over her to keep her warm, and gets Catherine secured in the passenger seat.
He has a clean getaway lined up. The engines are ready. But then he hears the remaining 3 captors return to the property in a Suzuki.
He hears the gravel crunch, the car door slamming, the heavy footsteps on the porch, their laughter.
He is sitting in the driver's seat, his hand hovering right over the ignition key. He could just turn it, drive away into the night, and let the local authorities handle the rest.
But he doesn't. He stops.
And this is where I want to push back a little on the traditional thriller hero trope. Usually the hero leaves the bad guys for the police to prove they are morally superior.
What's fascinating here is his moral breaking point, and how the author subverts that expectation of the clean hero.
Ben closes his eyes and is immediately assaulted by the images from that television screen inside the house.
The big hands on young flesh, the imploring, terrified eyes of the girl. He looks back at Maria's slight, heavily doped body in the back seat of his truck.
And he makes a very conscious, deliberate decision to abandon the clean extraction. He reaches under his seat and pulls out his backup weapon.
And it isn't a precision weapon. It's an Ithaca 12-gauge sawn-off shotgun.
It's brutal, less than 2 feet long, and loaded with double-aught buck rounds.
For context, double-aught buckshot is ammunition designed to blow through barricaded doors or neutralize large game. It is devastating at close range.
He tells Catherine he'll be right back. He walks back up to the house, stepping right behind the 3 men at the porch. One is fat, one is long-haired, joking together in Turkish. The third guy has tattoos and a Chinese Colt 1911 copy tucked into his belt in a very amateur fashion with the hammer down.
Ben doesn't yell freeze or announce himself as law enforcement. He just pumps the slide action of the Ithaca.
That sound, that metallic clack-clunk, is universal. It cuts through the air. The men spin around, their eyes wide, their cigarettes dropping from their mouths.
And Ben doesn't say a word. He just stares at them coldly for half a second before emptying the entire magazine into their bodies at point-blank range.
It is absolute savage justice. It establishes Ben Hope not as a traditional white knight hero, but as a deeply flawed, fiercely protective anti-hero.
He operates entirely outside the boundaries of the law when he believes the law is fundamentally insufficient to punish true evil.
He is a man who balances the scales of justice with extreme violence, driven entirely by the ghosts of the victims he couldn't save in the past. It's a heavy, intense introduction to his character, but the narrative immediately pulls us out of the heat and the blood of Turkey and into the cold, isolating reality of his exhaustion.
The timeline moves forward 2 days.
Ben is on a 747 over France, drinking his 4th or 5th airline scotch, staring out at the ocean of clouds. The adrenaline of the raid is completely faded, leaving only deep fatigue.
His plan was to retreat to his sanctuary, an old remote house on the west coast of Ireland with a private beach where he can be entirely alone with the gulls and his thoughts.
It highlights the isolation of his lifestyle. He seeks out remote places because he doesn't fit into normal society anymore.
But that sanctuary will have to wait, because when he landed in Istanbul to catch his flight, he checked his phone and found a 5-day-old voicemail.
And the voice on that recording belongs to Llewellyn.
The sister of Oliver, the man we saw murdered under the ice in the first section.
Exactly. She sounds tense, breathless, scared. She begs Ben to come find her at the Dorchester Hotel in London.
Hearing that voice, a voice he hasn't spoken to in 15 years, is enough to make him cancel his Dublin flight instantly and reroute to London.
And as he sits on that plane over France, the author gives us a deep dive into Ben's internal monologue, explaining the history between them. We learn that the last time he even saw her was at her brother Oliver's funeral back in January.
And the imagery the text paints of that funeral is stark and cinematic. Icy Welsh rain lashing down on a desolate cemetery.
Lee standing at the edge of the grave, her long black hair streaming, completely oblivious to the paparazzi and photographers hovering nearby. They're all trying to snap a lucrative picture of the famous opera star grieving her brother.
Ben was there, but he was watching from a distance, hiding in the trees. He didn't approach her.
The text is very clear about why he stayed in the shadows. There is too much unresolved pain between them. He harbors a profound, deep-seated guilt.
He states in his own thoughts that he couldn't call her, quote, not after what he'd done to her 15 years ago. He slipped a business card to her personal assistant in the parking lot and simply vanished.
And that thought of what he'd done to her 15 years ago transitions us into an incredible flashback sequence.
We leave the airplane and go back a decade and a half to a washed-out Tuesday night in Ballykelly, Northern Ireland.
Ben is a lance corporal, off-duty, walking down a puddled alley past sectarian graffiti into a little smoky wine bar. He orders a Black Bush whiskey from Joe, the bartender.
And who is sitting there playing the battered upright piano? Private Oliver Llewellyn.
The author gives us a very different Oliver here than the terrified man we saw in Austria.
This is Oliver in his youth. He has a severe military buzz cut, and he's pounding out Jerry Lee Lewis boogie-woogie before seamlessly transitioning into complex Oscar Peterson jazz chords.
He is portrayed as immensely talented, highly charismatic, and entirely reckless.
He really is. He is actively flirting with a 20-year-old local girl named Bernie, pulling her onto the piano stool with him, laughing.
He's telling her he's SS, which he jokingly claims stands for sexy, attractive, sophisticated.
But in Northern Ireland, a British soldier openly flirting with a local girl in a bar is a recipe for disaster. The atmosphere sours instantly when 4 local guys walk in.
They are surly, overconfident, and immediately take offense to Bernie hanging around someone they view as an occupying force. The leader, a big, pasty-faced guy named Gary, demands she come over to them.
Oliver, realizing the situation is about to explode, calmly finishes his pint and leaves the bar, trying to avoid a massive incident inside.
But the 4 guys aren't letting it go. They follow Oliver out into the dark alleyway. They shove him hard against the brick wall. 2 of them pull lock knives.
Gary punches Oliver in the stomach, but Oliver, to his credit, fights back immediately, headbutting Gary right between the eyes and breaking his nose.
But it quickly devolves into a messy, dangerous street fight. They have knives to Oliver's throat and are ripping cash from his wallet.
And this is where we see Ben's elite military training perfectly juxtaposed against chaotic street-level violence. Ben comes out of the bar and comes up silently behind them.
He doesn't yell. He analyzes the threats instantly. He ignores Gary, who is clutching his bleeding nose, and focuses entirely on the men holding the lethal weapons, the knives.
He grabs a fistful of one attacker's hair, delivers a sharp practice kick to the back of the knee to collapse his leg, and drops him to the ground.
And Ben specifically notes in his internal monologue that he could have easily killed him with a lethal strike to the neck.
But instead, he stamps hard on the man's genitals, neutralizing him with excruciating pain without committing a murder.
It is a brutal but highly measured application of force. Seeing their friend drop so effortlessly, the other 2 knife men panic and run down the alley.
Which leaves Gary the leader. Gary turns around, his face slick with blood from the headbutt, and he raises his fists. He wants a piece of Ben.
And Ben just reads him like an open book.
He really does. This is a masterclass in kinesiology and combat psychology. Ben anticipates Gary's movements precisely.
He categorizes Gary instantly as a sloppy brawler. A man who lacks brains and discipline, relying purely on alcohol-fueled rage and sheer physical strength.
Ben knows, from years of hand-to-hand combat training, that a brawler like Gary will always throw a slow, heavily telegraphed, curved arc punch, a haymaker.
Right, because a haymaker uses momentum rather than technique.
Exactly. And when Gary does exactly that, Ben mathematically dismantles him. He steps inside the arc of the punch, catches Gary's fist, applies a joint lock, and physically breaks the man's wrist.
As Gary screams, Ben follows up with a precision jab that literally pulverizes Gary's lips, sending him crashing backward into the metal trash bins.
When Ben helps Oliver up from the ground, the text includes a visceral auditory detail. Ben notes the sound of Gary's splintered teeth crunching under his boots on the wet concrete.
It is a clinical, terrifyingly efficient application of violence to protect a fellow soldier. But the real turning point of this flashback isn't the fight itself. It's the quiet aftermath.
Oliver's wallet has been tossed on the ground, its contents scattered in the puddles.
Ben bends down to pick it up, starts slotting the papers back in, and he sees a photograph. It's a picture of Oliver at a party, his arm around a 19-year-old girl.
She's wearing a green evening dress. She has lustrous black hair cascading over her shoulders and brilliant jade green eyes.
Ben is completely captivated. It takes physical effort for him to tear his gaze away from the photo. He tells Oliver sternly that if he had a girlfriend who looked like that waiting at home, he wouldn't be wasting his time chasing local girls in dangerous bars.
And Oliver wipes the blood from his split lip, smiles, and replies, "That's not my girlfriend. She's my little sister."
That is the exact moment Ben's past and present fundamentally collide.
That photograph is the catalyst for the intense romance that would ultimately leave them both deeply scarred. It is the emotional tether that pulls Ben out of the sky over France and drops him straight into her hotel room 15 years later.
Which brings us directly to present-day London. Ben arrives at the opulent foyer of the Dorchester Hotel. He heads up to room 1221 to finally see Lee.
But before he can even knock on the door, he runs into a literal wall of meat. Specifically, a 350-pound, 6'4" bodyguard squeezed into a tight polyester suit.
The text notes, the guy's face is cratered with acne scars from a decade of heavy steroid use, and he has a tiny, shaven head. This guy immediately refuses to let Ben in.
He looks Ben up and down, calls him a dwarf, and aggressively tells him to piss off. When Ben reaches forward to knock on the door anyway, the giant grabs Ben's wrist.
And once again, Ben demonstrates a core tenet of advanced martial arts. Sheer mass is irrelevant against applied biomechanical technique.
Ben gives the man one soft warning. When the guard ignores it, Ben twists his hand into a complex lock that is a fraction of a millimeter away from snapping the radiocarpal joint entirely.
He bends the giant's arm up behind his back, applying leverage that forces this 350-pound wall of steroid-fueled muscle straight down to his knees in agony.
Ben leans in and tells him softly, "Pain is like that. It didn't matter how big they were."
I love that line. It completely humiliates the primary guard, forcing the hotel room door to open, revealing two other similarly cheap-suited guards standing nervously inside.
And standing behind them is Lee Llewellyn. She tells the guards to back off, that it's all right, she knows him.
They step into her vast, luxurious suite, which is filled with the scent of expensive flowers. They face each other, the weight of 15 years of silence hanging heavily between them.
She is still strikingly beautiful, but the text notes she is dressed down. Wearing faded jeans, a simple navy sweater, no makeup, just a gold locket on a thin chain.
And her first words to him, after a decade and a half, are freezing cold. She looks at him and says, "I promised myself that the next time I saw you, I was going to slap your face."
The tension in that room is palpable. She is angry, she deeply resents him for abandoning her all those years ago, and she is trying to put on a brave face.
She claims she doesn't actually need his help anymore, that it was a moment of weakness calling him. And she even coldly offers to pay him for his travel time from her purse, treating him like hired help.
But Ben sees right through the bravado. He points to the door, mocking her circus of incompetent bodyguards, and asks her to drop the act and tell him what's really going on.
She finally relents. Her facade crumbles, she admits she's absolutely terrified, and she pours them both a heavy double measure of single malt scotch.
She sits down and tells him what happened 6 weeks prior. She was performing the lead in Tosca at the Royal Opera, staying in a quiet, rented flat in Covent Garden to avoid the press.
She was walking down a seemingly empty street in broad daylight when she realized she was being followed by a big, dark-colored car.
The car suddenly swerved onto the pavement, cutting off her path. 3 men in sharp, dark business suits jumped out. When she tried to run, one of them grabbed her arm.
And her survival tactic here is brilliantly pragmatic. She tells Ben that while she lives in Monte Carlo, where she generally feels safe, whenever she travels in Europe or the USA, She always carries a layer of protection.
Not mace or pepper spray because she knows it's illegal to carry in Britain, but a little travel-sized can of hairspray in her purse.
When the man grabbed her, she pulled it out and sprayed the chemical directly into his open eyes.
Which is incredibly smart. It's an improvised weapon, perfectly suited for her environment. The attacker started screaming, let go of her arm to claw at his eyes, and pulled a gun from his jacket.
She ran like crazy down the street, managed to flag down a passing taxi, threw herself inside, and screamed at the driver to just drive anywhere. She hasn't been back to her Covent Garden flat since.
She has been relying entirely on the Dorchester Hotel security and these hired thugs for protection.
So what does this all mean? Ben listens to this entire story, and you can see his mind immediately switch from former lover to elite threat analysis mode.
Exactly. He delivers what is essentially an absolute masterclass in kidnap and ransom analysis.
He explains to Lee that professional kidnapping is not a crime of passion. It is a highly structured business.
It relies entirely on the ultimate form of emotional blackmail. It only works if there is a third party, a husband, a wealthy family, a corporation, who is terrified enough of losing the victim that they will readily pay an exorbitant sum of money to get them back.
So Ben starts doing the math. He asks her directly if she ever married.
She mentions she briefly dated a composer named Chris Anderson years ago, but they are just friends now. She's single.
Okay, so no wealthy husband to extort.
Right. Ben then asks the critical industry-specific question, does she have K&R insurance?
High net worth individuals, celebrities, corporate executives operating in hostile areas often hold kidnap and ransom policies through syndicates like Lloyd's of London.
These policies will pay out millions to secure a hostage's release. Often, kidnapping rings will target people specifically because they know these policies exist.
But Lee looks at him blankly. She didn't even know K&R insurance existed.
So the entire financial equation changes. If there is no wealthy husband to extort and no massive secret insurance policy to bleed dry, then the motive for the kidnapping is fundamentally not financial.
And Ben points out another crucial detail. They knew exactly where her quiet, undisclosed rented flat was. They tried to snatch her in Covent Garden, not outside the Royal Opera House where she'd be expected.
Therefore, it wasn't a crime of opportunity or a case of mistaken identity by street thugs. It was a highly professional, specifically targeted intelligence operation.
Put yourself in Lee's shoes for a second. You have no ransom value, you have no wealthy spouse, yet highly trained professionals in business suits are trying to snatch you off the street in broad daylight with firearms.
What goes through your mind when you realize the motive isn't money? Someone, somewhere, specifically wants her alive, for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with the financial payout. That is far more terrifying than a standard robbery.
It's the fear of the unknown. And because of this realization, her current plan to hide out needs a massive upgrade. She tells Ben she can't stand being trapped in the hotel anymore. She feels like a sitting duck.
She needs to be in Venice in mid-January for rehearsals of The Magic Flute, which, interestingly, is the same opera Oliver hid his evidence in. But first, she is heading to the rural village of Aston in West Oxfordshire.
She reveals she secretly bought a large, unfurnished country house there called Langton Hall, with long-term plans to eventually start an opera school.
Only she, her personal assistant, and her business manager even know the property exists. She plans to hide there for a few days to clear her head.
Ben agrees to help her get there safely, but he insists on one condition. She has to fire the steroid pumped amateurs at the door immediately.
He promises to use his contacts to find her real professional protection, the kind of invisible, highly lethal ghost that he himself used to train in the military.
He looks her in the eye and promises her he won't let her down again. And as they make these plans to retreat to the English countryside, the narrative does something brilliant.
It pulls us all the way up to the architectural level of the conspiracy. We shift locations entirely, moving away from the victims and the protectors, straight into the lap of the mastermind.
We move to Bern, Switzerland. It is a snowy, bitter night outside a heavily guarded luxury conference hotel.
And the author sets the scene against a very specific, mobilized backdrop. There is a massive crowd of protesters outside the hotel gates. They are waving banners that say things like "Stop Climate Chaos" and "Aragon for Europe."
Right, and just to be clear for the listener, we are looking at the political landscape the author has built for this novel. The text describes this rising charismatic Euro politician named Aragon, who champions strong green and anti-nuclear policies and is gaining massive, passionate middle-class support across the continent.
Exactly. And what's fascinating from a narrative perspective isn't the specific ideology of this fictional political movement, but how the antagonist uses these massive, passionate, democratic protests.
The villain doesn't care about the climate or European unity. He uses the sheer physical mass of the protests, the media attention they draw, and the chaos they create simply as a smokescreen, a camouflage for his own clandestine, highly illegal operations.
And that mastermind is introduced as a man named Werner Kroll. He is described as a slightly built, elegantly dressed committee president in his late 60s.
He doesn't look like a Bond villain. He looks like a banker. He is riding in the plush back seat of a black limousine, which is part of a massive 13-car procession leaving the hotel, surrounded by motorcycle police and heavy security.
He sits patiently, hands folded delicately on his lap. His muscular assistant, a man named Jack, sits opposite him, looking out the window at the protesters with absolute seething derision.
Jack is calling them idiots and loudly asking what they think they are actually achieving by standing in the snow.
Kroll's response to his assistant is bone-chilling in its quiet arrogance. He just gazes out the tinted window at the angry, shouting crowd and softly replies, "Democracy gives them the illusion of freedom."
Wow. If we connect this to the bigger picture, that single line of dialogue tells us everything we need to know about Werner Kroll's worldview. He is not a politician beholden to these crowds or their votes.
He is a puppet master operating on a level entirely above the political movements playing out in the streets. He views the democratic process, the protesting, the voting, merely as a pacifier for the masses.
It keeps them busy while he engineers real, tangible power in the shadows. And the text demonstrates the raw, psychological power of his presence during what is described as the egg incident.
A young, passionate vegan protester named Heine Miller is standing right by the police barricades with a box of months-old, foul-smelling, rotten eggs.
He raises his arm, ready to smash one against the window of Kroll's advancing limousine as a symbol of defiance. But the limo stops momentarily in the crush of the crowd.
The opaque, bulletproof window smoothly whirs down, and Kroll locks eyes directly with Heine.
It's a terrifying moment of eye contact.
The psychological impact of Kroll's gaze is described by the author almost as a physical force. The deafening roar of the crowd simply vanishes from Heine's ears. Kroll's eyes are described as being like ice.
The text says that single look seemed to drain the blood straight out of the young man's veins. Heine is entirely paralyzed.
He experiences a profound autonomic nervous system reaction. He freezes, he is transfixed, robbed completely of his will to act or protest.
His raised arm falls limp to his side. He inadvertently crushes the rotten egg in his own trembling hand, and the window simply rolls back up as the car glides smoothly away.
Kroll didn't need his security detail to step in and stop the protester. His sheer, terrifying aura of absolute authority shut the young man down completely.
It's a masterfully written introduction to a villain. He doesn't need to raise his voice or lift a finger to exert control. As the limo speeds away from the protest, Kroll's encrypted phone rings.
The voice on the line is apologetic and clearly frightened, reporting back on the London operation. The caller admits that Llewellyn left the Dorchester before they could get to her. They missed her by half an hour.
But then the caller nervously adds a caveat. They've tracked her again, and they have her new secret address.
The intelligence network Kroll commands is staggering. Only 3 people knew about Langton Hall, yet Kroll's men have the address within hours.
Kroll writes it down on a notepad, hangs up the phone without uttering a single word of reprimand or praise, and turns on a small, flat-screen TV built into the limo's console.
He presses play on a DVD. He watches an interview of Llewellyn wearing a creamy cashmere dress and pearls, speaking elegantly to a television host.
He stares intently at the screen, observing her every movement. He tells his assistant, Jack, she's certainly something.
And then he calmly hands the piece of paper with her new Oxfordshire address to Jack, simply ordering him to make the necessary arrangements.
He is the architect, and with a casual wave of his hand, he has just signed her death warrant.
Which brings the threat directly to the doorstep of our final section. We move with Ben and Lee to Langton Hall in the village of Aston, West Oxfordshire.
It is dark, heavily frosted, and moonlit. The house is completely secluded among wintry oaks at the very end of a long, twisty driveway. Lee unlocks the heavy oak front door and disables the security alarm.
The house is vast, freezing cold, and entirely unfurnished, filled only with stacked packing cases. It feels less like a sanctuary and more like a tomb.
And Ben's reaction to the environment is fascinating. You can see the hypervigilance of a veteran immediately kick in. He doesn't relax just because they're in the quiet countryside.
He tells Lee to go lock the kitchen door behind him while he goes out to the woodshed to fetch logs for a fire. But he doesn't just casually stroll outside.
Before he leaves the kitchen, he quietly slides open a drawer, finds a large, sharp carving knife, and discreetly slips it inside his jacket.
His paranoia is fully engaged. His training demands that he treat this empty, echoing country house exactly like a hostile combat zone until proven otherwise.
It's a sad reality of his existence. He can never truly turn it off. But once he secures the perimeter and gets a fire roaring in the small study, the tension in the narrative shifts beautifully from tactical survival to deeply emotional vulnerability.
They are sitting together on the hearthrug, eating hastily made fried egg sandwiches and drinking cheap wine they picked up from a village shop.
And as the firelight dances over them, the conversation drifts back 15 years to a town called Bilth Wells in Wales. They talk fondly about Lee's father, Richard, who used to meticulously restore antique pianos in his dusty study.
But inevitably, they have to confront the ghost in the room. Lee looks at Ben and tells him honestly that she hated him for a very long time.
She asks the question that has been haunting her for a decade and a half. She asks him why he didn't turn up on the night of her very first professional singing debut.
She was young, nervous, and she sang her absolute heart out for him, expecting him to be standing backstage with flowers when the curtain fell. But he never showed up. He just vanished from her life without a word.
And Ben, sitting in the quiet of the country house, finally admits the raw, uncomfortable truth. He doesn't offer a dramatic excuse about a secret mission.
He tells her he loved her deeply, but he loved his regiment more. He admits he was young, he was arrogant, he thought he knew exactly what he wanted from life.
And he consciously chose the adrenaline, the brotherhood, and the singular focus of his elite military career over the complexities of their relationship.
It's a moment of profound, painful vulnerability for this hardened operative. He acknowledges his own selfishness.
It's a beautifully written, quiet moment. But the warmth of the firelight fades very quickly when the conversation inevitably turns to her recently deceased brother, Oliver.
They begin dissecting the official police story of Oliver's death on the frozen lake in Austria. Lee explains what the authorities told her, a narrative based entirely on the testimony of the sole alleged witness, a diplomat's wife named Madeleine Laurent.
Let's break down this official narrative, because it's a perfect example of how a lie is constructed. The story goes that Oliver and Madeleine were attending a VIP black tie party at the mansion.
They supposedly drank a massive amount of champagne. The story claims Oliver was aggressively trying to get Madeleine to leave the party and go to a local hotel for sex.
He supposedly drove erratically, crashed his classic MG into a stone wall on the way, and then, inexplicably, decided to pull the damaged car over by the edge of a frozen lake in the middle of a blizzard.
The narrative states he decided it would be fun to go ice skating in the dark, wandered out onto the ice in his tuxedo, fell through and drowned, all while Madeleine was passed out drunk in the passenger seat.
And Ben's investigator mind, trained to spot behavioral anomalies, immediately begins shredding this narrative to pieces. He points out the massive, glaring flaws.
First, he knows Oliver. They served together. Oliver enjoyed a drink, but he was fundamentally not a reckless drunk driver.
But more importantly, Ben focuses on the psychological profile of the event, which makes absolutely zero sense.
Right. Ben uses statement analysis logic here. He points out that human behavior, even when intoxicated, generally follows a goal-oriented path.
A guy who is aggressively horny, who has just crashed his beloved classic car trying to rush a woman to a hotel bed, does not suddenly stop his momentum in the freezing cold to go on a solo ice skating excursion in a tuxedo.
It is a completely absurd, contradictory sequence of human behavior.
Ben sees right through the fiction. He realizes they are not looking at a tragic accident. They are looking at a meticulously crafted, highly sanitized cover story, complete with a paid-off or heavily coerced witness in Madeleine Laurent.
And then Lee delivers the final missing piece of the puzzle that ties everything we've talked about today together. Ben asks a fundamental question. What was Oliver, a former soldier turned music enthusiast, even doing at a high-level diplomatic VIP party in Austria in the first place?
And Lee replies that he wasn't there just to drink champagne and party. He was there researching a book.
This raises an important question. What book? What could he possibly be researching that would get him executed by professionals with submachine guns?
And this is where the genius of the plot structure reveals itself. It ties every single thread of this deep dive together perfectly. Think back to the very beginning of the source material.
Oliver frantically emailed his professor about something called the Mozart letter right before he was captured and executed.
And the book opens with Mozart's epigraph. explicitly claiming he was assassinated by the untraceable poison, aqua tofana.
The connection is undeniable. Oliver was researching a book, presumably about this exact historical mystery surrounding Mozart's death, but he didn't just find old sheet music.
He uncovered something highly dangerous at that Austrian mansion. Perhaps physical evidence of the clandestine society that originally orchestrated the poisoning centuries ago.
A society that still exists and operates today with men like Werner Kroll at the helm. The modern, brutal cover-up of Oliver's death on the ice is inextricably, directly tied to a lethal secret he unearthed from 1791.
It is an incredible, sprawling web of a narrative. We've gone from an ancient musical mystery concerning the alleged poisoning of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart with a 17th century Italian toxin to a modern-day submachine gun execution brilliantly covered up as a drunken ice skating accident.
We've followed a brutal, traumatized ex-ass operative seeking some form of violent redemption in the blood of kidnappers, and we've peered into the luxurious limousine of a shadowy elite figure who orchestrates high-level snatches from behind the veil of European climate protests.
It is a brilliant orchestration of suspense, history, and tactical realism.
And it leaves us with a highly provocative thought to mull over as we conclude. We have just spent the last hour dissecting how easily a brutal murder on a frozen lake, complete with automatic weapons, shattered ice, and multiple professional assassins, can be seamlessly repackaged to the local authorities and the global public as a tragic, drunken accident validated by a single compromised witness.
If modern history, with all our advanced forensics, digital tracking, and technology, could be rewritten and sanitized so smoothly in a matter of hours to protect a hidden agenda, what does that say about the historical truths we accept as absolute fact from centuries ago?
If Mozart's death truly was a coordinated conspiracy, how many other foundational facts of our history books are just well-crafted alibis that simply survive the test of time?
That is a thought that will definitely keep you up at night next time you read a history book. Thank you for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive into the source material. We hope this extensive exploration has given you a powerful new perspective on the text, the history, and the tactics within it. Stay curious, keep looking past the official narratives, and keep questioning the story you're being told.